This episode of Simulation Nation is brought to you by Avkin, your one-stop shop for wearable simulators and everything standardized patient.
Everybody, welcome to the Simulation Nation podcast. We are going to be talking about all things accreditation and certification here today. We're going to be talking from our own experiences of two people who have gone through this, just to, again, give you kind of the tips and tricks, the background that kind of goes into all of it. And if you have any experience, please leave any information that you have in the comments. Share your experiences. Again, it's always good for us to just get more people sharing, talking about it. Or if you're in leadership at any of these places and want to put in more information, anything we leave out or anything like that, please do. The more information that we can have here, the better it is for our listeners and all of your fellow simulationists that will be able to gain from this experience or information.
Yeah, and we're going to have a blog post for them with different links and things like that at the end of this. So you don't have to take mad notes. We're not going to put links or addresses in here, but just, again, generally talking about all things certification within healthcare simulation.
Yep.
It is a very near and dear topic to my heart.
I know it is.
You tell me I talk a lot about it.
Yes,
so,
you do.
This is really just dedicated to that so that we can get that information out there and make sure that everybody within the healthcare simulation industry is aware of the different options that are available. But then also to think about the fact that the accrediting bodies within every discipline that we have in healthcare has literally no idea that there are certifications. And I know I've mentioned this before, but the idea that people that are in the National Council of State Boards of Nursing or people that are within the ACGME may not have any idea that there are actual certifications for institutions as well as individuals is shocking to me. I don't know about internationally. I do know that there are different accreditation options internationally as well, and we'll talk about those a little bit. But I think the really important thing is to say, hey, there is regulations that are associated, and there is certifications and accreditation associated with healthcare simulation. It really, again, stands us up as an industry. And I think it's just really important that we're talking about it, not just within our scope or within our world, but also we think about it within the larger perspective of this, of speaking to it while you're getting accredited by different institutions and helping them to understand that there is a science behind this. There are standards of best practice that are behind this, and that those are being evaluated by leadership within the different associations to ensure that every institution is doing this. And, you go through a recertification process too. So it's not just a one and done.
Yeah.
I think that's just so important that we're getting that word out. So the more I can shout it from the mountaintops, the better, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that it can also be really overwhelming to someone looking at it, right? There's so many options and each have kind of their own nuance to it of what it's going to look like. And I think it can just become overwhelming with all of the steps and everything that needs to happen and the different accrediting bodies. And I think that's what we really want to dive in here, is saying, here's the different nuances to each of these pieces. These are the right people to be applying for this. And then here's some of the early steps of being able to get started with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the only individual one that I know of is through SSH, Society for Simulation in Healthcare. And that is they offer two different certifications. One is a certified healthcare simulation educator. Actually, there's
Multiple. Four.
Okay. So yeah. So because you have the advanced of both of them. So it's CHSOS, and then they have the advanced for both the certified healthcare simulation educator and the SimOps certifications. So you want to talk a little bit about that, because you most recently had you most recently took that exam. For the CHESI.
Yes. So I took the Certified Healthcare Simulation Educator. And when I went through that process, I was a little nervous because I didn't have background in clinical. So that was something that was just kind of like, am I the right person to be taking this? Should I even be taking this? But because I was working in simulation so heavily, at that point, we were still going around and doing speaking engagements. We were putting on presentations on simulation in general. I felt like I needed to move forward with it because I knew that this was where I was going to stay. I knew I was going to stay in simulation. And even though my background is in being a standardized patient educator, I felt like I needed to basically show that what I knew about simulation. And that was something that for me I felt very strongly about, was that, yes, I know a lot more about standardized patients, but I've been in the world of simulation for so long. I know Stern's best practice. I know how to write an objective. I know how to do an evaluation for if you're looking for a simulation, what to do next. So,
and I think the big thing with this is, for any of these that we're talking about, what it did was it had you take an honest look at what you knew and where the gaps were.
Absolutely.
Right? So based off that exam, you have to have 2 years experience in simulation. So it can't just be
You can't
tomorrow.
be walking in the door.
Right.
You can't be walking, because the whole goal of it is that you're testing your knowledge, not just you're gaining the knowledge, but it's that you're showing, these are my 2 years, this is what I've learned in the process.
Right. So you have to have experience in simulation. It doesn't matter what discipline you are. Obviously, you don't even necessarily need to be a practitioner.
You don't even need a discipline, guys.
Well, you have a discipline. It's just not a health
standardized patients.
Yeah. And then the other big thing with all of these is you get to see where the holes are. So why don't you talk a little bit about, the steps that you took to get ready for it?
Yeah. So when getting ready, again, you have to go through the application process. So I had to reach out because I didn't have a background in healthcare. So I had to reach out and kind of get almost like special approval to go through the process. So even if you don't have that clinical background, you can reach out and they will, again, make exceptions based off of the fact that you're working in simulation, you're involved. Again, I was in operations, so it didn't make sense for me to take that one. You do need to have a college degree. So that's another expectation that they have there on the application process. And then,
but you don't have to.
You don't have to.
You can get that as an exception
as an exception as well.
Right.
But again, it's just kind of like they want to make sure that you are relevant in simulation. I think that's the biggest thing is like, show me you work in a sim center and you know what you're doing. The other piece of it is that you need to have 3 references. So you need to have 3 other people in simulation that can provide references for you. And basically you'll put their information in, it sends them an email. And I believe they just are filling out like a template, like it's not a letter or anything like that. It's just a reference sheet, basically just to vouch for the fact that you're involved in simulation. And, again, this is something that you're working towards gaining more information on. So once you go through that and you get approved for your application, because you have to wait, this is the time when you're waiting. I think everybody waits to study. It's almost like, I'm not going to start looking at the test. I'm not going to really do anything else until I get approved. And I think that that's the pitfall, that then you start to become unmotivated because you're super excited, you put in your application, and then life just gets in the way. And I think that when you're not studying during that time and you're not ready to go, then it just prolongs everything because you've run out of that steam. So my recommendation is to start studying while you're waiting for your application to get approved. Start looking into your different options. So
how long did it take? Is it a couple weeks? Or?
Well, mine got held up because someone didn't fill mine out for a period of time. So I had to reach out and be like, hey, I need you to fill this out. Like you do have a portal to be able to go on and check who's filled it out and things like that. So you know that. But again, like you're obviously not trying to be pushy. Everyone's busy. You don't want to be like, hey, I need you to fill that out. So you wait for a little bit. I'd say mine, I think was probably 3 months. I think mine was 3 months. And again, I had a delay. So I think that it just depends on how quickly your references are in filling things out. But again, I think everything just takes a little bit of time. Things get lost, right? But at that point, I started looking into the exam. I started looking into the different sections. And SSH does a great job of having this all on their website where you can go in, you can look at basically what the test is going to cover and start to be able to make, do a self-assessment. Like you said, figure out where are the holes and what you need to know. So I started doing that. And again, there was a few areas I felt really confident in and a few areas I was like, I don't know much about this area, or this is not my area of expertise. I have not done a lot in this. So I went through the review course. So they have a review course. It doesn't cost a lot of money. I don't remember how much it was when I took it. And again, this was 3 years ago at this point. But when I went through it, we had an instructor and basically we would meet once a week. And so then that was great because we'd all get together. We had different sections each week that we needed to cover. And the best part of it was we would take basically like a little mini review test. So on that section, you could go in, they used old test questions. And again, you could just kind of like see your knowledge. That was so helpful for me because it gave me so much more confidence. I just remember feeling like I was staring up at this mountain and just like, I don't know if I am qualified for this. Again, I'm meeting with people who have PhDs. I'm just like, I don't think I am qualified to take this exam. But being able to do the test questions, that was just really helpful because I, again, was scoring well on them and I was like, oh, I can pass this. But even just seeing what the questions were, so much of it was practical knowledge that I was doing day in and day out at the sim lab. So it was just using your best, course of judgment and being able to go forward. So by no means was it easy. I definitely needed to study. I needed to be prepared for what I was doing. And I'm so glad I took that review course because I think if anything, it gave me the confidence going into the test. And then going through it, I just focused on the areas that I knew I was weaker in. And again, went through and just really dived into all of those areas. I made little flashcards for the things I wasn't confident in. And then felt good enough. I would say, I think my review course was, I think it was 6 weeks. And then I took the exam right after. So I think all in all, from applying for it to taking the exam was probably between 5 and 6 months, something along those lines.
And from my perspective, I went through the National League for Nursing Simulation Leadership Group in 2015. And I remember Marianne Rizzolo saying, if you don't have your certified healthcare simulation educator certification, you all need to get it. And I think it was the first time
and it was new at that point, right?
It was fairly new, not super new, but I think it came out in 2012 or something.
Okay.
But it was the first time where I felt validated that I could take the exam and that I think a lot of simulationists really live in this bubble or in isolation and don't really rub shoulders with other simulationists and know where they fit or what level they are on. So it was the first time that I really was encouraged to do that. Again, my dean and my director didn't know anything about the certification. So it was exciting to think about it. I had heard of it before, but I thought it was for the people that were really high up in simulation. I don't think they had a review course at that time. I didn't take one if they did, but they did have some books out. Yeah. So I did a lot of reviewing the books. I talked to people that had taken the exam in the past. And I really, again, spent a lot of time looking at where the deficits may be. I think this SSH website also has like a pre-test where you can go through and do some questions and just get used to it as well. I think I did that as well.
I don't think they have that anymore. I think that's only in the review course now.
Oh, okay, maybe. But from my perspective, I think that it was a lot easier than what I thought it was. And I know as adults, going back and taking exams is scary. I mean, you get used to it through college and then you're like, I don't want to do this again. I remember in my master's program when I had to take advanced anatomy and physiology and actually sit down and take exams or pharmacology. It's just so nerve-wracking as an adult because you don't want to fail, right?
Yeah. I remember when we were I think it was at ANACSO. I'm not going to say who it was because we haven't gotten permission to say this. But when we were there, I remember we were talking to a giant in simulation, someone who, again, we all think of and we're like, that's who we think of as a founding person in simulation. And I remember talking about taking the exam, and she said, I didn't tell anyone I was going to take it. I went off privately and did it. And then when I passed it, then I told everybody that I was taking it. But even the fact that she didn't want to publicly let anyone know that she was doing it or even let her colleagues know. Again, I think it's just all the way around. You start to feel that kind of like, wait, but what if I don't pass this? Like, then I have to share that I didn't, right? And I think that that's just something that everyone faces across the board. But I think when it's you, it just feels like, well, it's only me. No one else feels this way. But everyone feels this way, guys.
You only have to take the exam once.
Yeah.
You can keep your accreditation up or your certification up in other ways. So, you can help to do publications, you can do presentations, you can do continuing education. But it's only a one time that you're required to take that exam, as long as you do the other things that are required to keep that certification active.
Yeah. And the operations side of the certification is very similar to the educator side. It's very, very similar in the same application process, going through, taking the exam, all of that. It just focuses on the operations side of things. There are a few people who have gone and gotten both certifications, which I think is a really great idea just in terms of being able to know both sides of it. I've never done operations, so I don't think I could ever It's just not, I don't think I could step into that world. But again, I think that it is important if you are managing both sides, and a lot of people are, they're managing the educator side as well as the operation side. If you feel confident to be able to go and get that certification, you think you can get both, I highly encourage people to go get both. I think it really diversifies yourself as an individual. And I think that it also allows you to see other sides of the simulation world, right? So if you're looking to go be a director, if you're looking to get higher, being able to have the certification and the educator side as well as the operation side to say, I understand how both of these sides work together. I think that again is something that if you feel like you are confident in that side, go and do both. Because I think that, again, that just really diversifies you in the world of simulation.
Well, Megan, I never thought about it, but maybe I need to go look into this CHSOS.
There you go.
Thing.
I think you should do it.
The last thing I'll say on this is, if you do have your CHESI and you have an impact in the healthcare simulation community beyond just your sim center, so that's really, regionally or mentoring or something along those lines, consider the idea of applying for the advanced CHESI because, and I'm sure of the same with the CHSOS, but a lot of people don't apply for the advanced. I think there's only 85, at least when I got my advanced, there was only 85 people in the entire world that had it. But it's really not, I think a lot of people think that you need to be one of the giants in order to apply for it. And that's not the case. It's really just that you are mentoring, or that maybe you're leading a regional sim group, or that you do a presentation.
It's really just that you are stepping outside of your own sim center.
Yes,
like that's really what it is that rather than you doing simulation at your institution and kind of keeping your head down, if you are going out and doing more beyond that, that's really what the advanced is for. I think that a lot, like what you said, I think a lot of times people see this as kind of a closed door, but really when you go through and look at it, it's so much more than that. Now, there are different levels of qualification. I believe you have to have a master's degree to go and get your advanced. So there definitely are higher levels of qualification to be able to go and do it. But the intent of it, I really think it is that you are looking beyond your sim center. So if that's something that you're doing in terms of presentation, research, leading a regional sim group, again, look into those qualifications. It is a different process though. You have to submit a portfolio versus take an exam. It's not just a more advanced exam.
It's really not as complicated as what it sounds. They have made the process so much easier in the last few years. So again, I encourage you to just look into it if it's something that you have an impact outside of just your own sim center. If you're just staying within your sim center and really not reaching out very much, it's probably not for you, but it's really not that complicated. As far as cost goes, they are affordable, but what we have found surprisingly is that many institutions do not fund individuals to get these individual certifications. Which I find so
shocking.
I think it's because they have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
But do know that whenever an AvKin is at a conference and we're offering some type of giveaway or raffle, it is typically to be able to sit for a CHESI exam because we want to encourage it. Again,
we just sponsored
it's our passion.
2 actually in this last month. We actually had 2 people reach out to us about wanting to go and do that.
I'm so excited.
Because it's so hard that if you're trying to further that. Now, again, they're not insanely expensive, but it's not cheap either, especially when it's coming out of your own pocket.
Right.
So it is, being able to have other people being able to do that. I think it's so important that if your institution's not willing to support it, AvKin will be willing to support it.
Well, not everybody in the world.
It's a raffle. It's a raffle, so you have to win it. But again, it is that concept.
We do it as much as we can.
We want to make sure that people are able to go forward and do this. I think that that's really important.
Especially if you're taking the review course and sitting for the exam. That it offsets that. So, and if you win the raffle and you already have it, then you are welcome to donate that to someone that you know that wants to get their CHESI. Yes. So, encouragement. I think, again, from my perspective, I think it's worth my last awareness was $325 or $350. It's worth that US dollars. In my mind, for your own personal professional growth, we probably pay that for membership to the different associations that we're involved with, but there is a cost associated.
And there is a discount if you're a member of SSH.
Yes.
There is a discount. Did I ever tell you my funny story when I went and sat for my CHESI? So when I took it, it was during COVID. So I couldn't go to a testing center to take it. So I had to take it remotely. And I actually took it in this room. So we were in this room.
The room that we are in right currently.
Yes, is where I took it. And I remember I was down here, and they go for the full gamut of like, look at your room, check your pencil, all that stuff. And I had never taken a virtual test like this before. Most people
had never.
So I was not prepared. So I remember I was already nervous, right? Like, you're already like sweating bullets with it. And so I remember he has me like show him the room, and I show him the room, and on the door there's glass. So I remember he's like, you can't do that. Like, you're going to need to find a different place. And here we didn't have a different place. Like, there was nowhere else for me to go to take this where no one else would be. And it was also like, it could only be one door. Like, there's so many rules around it, but I didn't know the rules until we were talking. And I just remember being like, what if I cover it? And him being like, well, that should be fine. And I was like, okay, I'll be right back. And I just remember running and getting a sheet that we use for conferences, running and grabbing one of those, bringing it down, covering the door, closing the door, and then showing him, and him being like, I guess that'll work. And I just remember like, okay, all right. So now at this point, I'm like out of breath, sweating, because I'm so nervous to already take this exam. Plus, then I thought I was going to have to reschedule the exam, and you have to like pay some sort of fee to do the rescheduling. So then I'm like sitting down to take the test, and I'm already like, now I'm like just so hyped up. Yeah. And then I remember there was something wrong with my pen, and my pen like goes across the room basically. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I like accidentally like flick it, and now it's like across the room, and I'm like, or pencil. And I was just remember like, all right, now I don't have a pencil. Okay, cool. All right. We're just gonna get through this at this point. I remember being like, I just need 30 seconds. And the guy was like, no problem. So I just remember like doing a quick little yoga session. I'm like, whoo, bring down the heart rate. Everyone's fine. Calm down. Mm-hmm. Like, we're gonna do this no pen or no pencil, and we are just gonna move forward. But I just remember that being and I remember being like, never again. I'm going to a test site. I'm never doing this again. So that was awful.
Because everybody that did it at a test site was like, I wish I could have done it virtually.
No, it was terrible. It was so bad. I mean, again, if I knew the rules, like if I was going back and doing it, I think it would have been a lot easier, but I was, no, it was not. It was not great. Because there's a lot of different levels. So if you're going back to get your CHESI or your CHSOS, when you're recertifying, you don't have to take the exam. You can take the re-exam as your recertification. But when you're going in, you have to put a certain level of professional development in and like go through and submit that. But there's different levels. So there's different sections that are all labeled differently, and you have to have one of your professional development in each of the sections. And I think people think that they have to have all of those hours in each section. You don't. You just need to have 1 hour in every single section at least, right? So when you're going in and you're submitting it, you have the option. They do give you a key, but I think you have to really kind of dig deeper into that key to really understand where your professional development fits. But you really need to read through that. And then when you're going into the portal to submit it, you just select which section it goes under, and then those hours are automatically put in there. So then once you have each of those sections, you just need to make sure that it's applicable with whatever webinar you watched. If you did an article, if you did a presentation, you could do mentoring, but whatever it is, you just have to make sure it fits into each of the sections. I just remember when I first went in there, I was very overwhelmed by all of the different pieces with the hours, with the different professional development that could be selected or could count, and just feeling like I had a puzzle piece that I had to figure out. And so I just think that with that, it's much easier once you dive into it, but they give you the options of what you can submit for your professional development. Then you pick the section, then you go in and submit it. But it's actually a lot easier once you kind of just start the process of redoing it. But I remember being really nervous, so I didn't do it for a while. And then I had to like spend hours submitting everything.
It's a lot easier if you put the professional development on and the things on as you go. I'm terrible at doing
when
that.
It's fresh in your mind. Just pop it in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just one of those things that I think when you're getting started, it feels overwhelming, and you're like, oh, this is going to be too much time. I can't do it now. But just get started. It just do it as you go. Do it while it's fresh in your mind, and then by the time you're ready to recertify, you just hit submit.
Yep.
So keeping with SSH, talk about accreditation for your simulation center.
Yeah, and there's 3 different certifications that have your sim center potential. So there's SSH, there's CSAM, and there's ASPIH. CSAM is more of a European type emphasis and international emphasis. SSH obviously has an international influence as well, but CSAM is really Europe, a lot of Europe, and the Middle East, I think also. And then also ASPIH, which is more UK, I think Australia. I assume Australia too, just because they're fairly connected. But and then SSH, again, I think is more the broader accreditation. But there are 3 different options for accreditation for your particular institution. Well, only one that I know of as far as the individual certification. I think SSH is the only one that offers individual certifications, if I'm not mistaken.
For the simulation center.
For like as a healthcare simulation educator, there's not another institution association that offers that option.
Yes. So when you're getting ready for accreditation, there are a lot of steps in getting ready for it. So you need to have research before you even get started. I believe it's 2 years of collected data and research from your simulation center. Correct?
Well, I mean, you can do a preliminary. It's called provisional. If you don't have it, but it's just they look at everything else and they say, is there anything else you should be working on while you're collecting that data? So there is a provisional one that doesn't require 2 years of data, but again, start collecting data because you need that data.
I tell people that all the time when we do consulting is if you are not currently collecting data on your simulations, just start. Just start. It can be as simple as sending out a 5-question simulation,
Likert scale.
Likert scale with your students before and after the simulation. Just start somewhere, because if you don't, it's going to be a whole, there's always a reason why, right? Every semester is busy. Every semester is chaotic, but just get started with collecting the data, and then you can go forward with, getting more in depth, collecting more information, but just start with a Likert scale and just start getting in the routine of that.
And if you're looking for a validated tool, I always recommend, and it's not, it's really just having the students evaluate it. So it's really like a Kirkpatrick 1. But Kim Leeton's SET-M is a validated evaluation tool. They used it during the National Council of State Boards of Nurses research study, I believe. But it is a validated tool. It is on the SSH website under evaluation tools or tools for simulation tools, but it is Kim Leeton's SET-M, and it's simulation evaluation tool. The -M is modified. That's just what it is. And they did a virtual one as well during COVID when that went down. But that is a validated tool. It's recognized, and SSH definitely will accept it during the accreditation.
Yeah. So start with that.
That'll be in our blog.
Yeah. That's always number 1, right? Start with that. Number 2, get buy-in from leadership. I think this is something
that's number
people,
1. That's
number 1.
That's
I think everyone should be collecting data no matter what.
Yes,
so even if you're not going through accreditation, you still should be collecting data. But either one, flip-flop them. I don't know. But getting buy-in from leadership, they need to understand the cost. They need to understand that this is going to come with a cost.
And the time and the work allocation.
Yes.
100%.
And you doing this on nights and weekends because you're not getting approval, you can get all the way through. And then when that bill comes in and your institution decides they don't want to pay it, sure, it's great to have all of that information, but you just spent all of that extra time getting it together and you're not actually going to get accredited because the leadership's not willing to foot the bill for it. And I think
that's a true story. That happened.
Yes. Someone that we know. Yes. Someone that we know went through and worked for months on nights and weekends getting everything together. She's the most organized with it person. And then when they found out the bill, they were like, we've decided we're not going to move forward with this, which I can't imagine how gut wrenching that is. But get your buy-in from leadership. Make sure they know the price tag. Make sure that you are advocating for how much time this is going to take, so you're not spending all of your nights and weekends doing it. I mean, again, in sim, we all know what that's like, so, I get it. But just do your best to advocate for the fact that this is something that is going to be monumental for your sim center. This is an expectation to make sure that you guys are well respected in the simulation world. If you want to be moving forward, you need this accreditation. And so this is what it's going to cost. Here's the time. Here's the money. that's what's
Yeah,
going to
and
happen.
my strong recommendation is that you do a project charter. That's something that we can also offer to you. But this project charter spells out who is on the team, what the roles are going to be, what the workload allocation is going to be. It's very specific. And so when you're handing this to your leadership, it's not just in generalities or in niceties. If you need a 20% workload allocation, that means somebody else is teaching one of your courses, or that means somebody else is doing something else, or whatever the case may be, or you're on overload for that piece of it. But you don't have to do this alone. When we went through accreditation at our sim center, we had a group of, I think there was 10 of us that were on the team that wrote different parts of it. And then there was one person that was assigned to read through the whole thing and make sure that it had the same language. But I mean, there's things in there about, do you have fire exits marked? And, things that you don't have to be a simulator. Yeah, you don't have to be a simulationist in order to write that information. So our safety officer within our department was the one that wrote that up. So be looking at the different pieces and break it up so that it's not just one person. Yeah. I mean, I feel very sorry for that individual that went through all that because they did it by themselves. They were the Lone Ranger there.
They actually partnered with local simulation centers, which I think is another really smart idea, that if you don't have a big team at your institution, if you don't have people you can rely on, now you can bring in someone again to write up the safety exits and things like that. But if you wanted to work with other simulation centers in your area and get together on, Thursdays at 3, right? You guys all get on Zoom, you work through it. If you have questions and things like that, you all are kind of in now almost like a study group going through and getting ready for it. So maybe they can't write it for you, but at least you can have other people that you're bouncing things off of. You're like, I was super confused by this. What do you guys think? Or can you read my page for me and I'll read yours, things like that. But even if you don't have those people at your institution, I think coming up with that kind of study group in your area, and even if it's not in your area, it really could be people you met at SSH. It could be people that you meet at a conference. It could just be,
posted on a listserv.
Yeah, post on LinkedIn, whatever it is that you're looking for other people, and kind of form your own little group to be able to go through that. I think that's a really, really creative idea, because it's a super overwhelming process, and it's kind of almost like you just got to take it chunk by chunk. You can't look at the whole mountain. You've got to take it piece by piece and break it down into what's reasonable. But again, I think that making sure that you have the financial backing is going to be the most important, and then the additional support that you need to make sure the accreditation actually goes through.
Yeah. And I will say that, so last year during Healthcare Sim Week, which I've already mentioned, my heart was on highlighting the different certifications and accreditation. And I remember speaking to the individual that was representing ASPIH. And they said, it's a hard process. It takes a lot of time. But what we always ask is, what do you need in your sim center? What are the things that we can advocate for you for? So for us, it was, at our institution, we needed more sim techs. We needed, because we had two different locations, 2 different parts of the campus. And so to think that sim techs could be able to be in 2 different places at the same time, getting sim set up, it's not as if, we do mornings here and afternoons there.
Yeah, no.
So having them also be advocates. So it's not as if you have to have your house in complete order, but it is that you need to be like, what's the ask? Be ready to tell the accreditors what the ask is, because that report then goes to your leadership to say, hey, you need dedicated sim faculty, or hey, you need to, whatever, have dedicated sim space
for your
versus
clinical
skill space, or whatever it is. So, think about that. The other really cool thing that it does is when you have people that are not necessarily as in love with simulation as you are, but they are doing sim, you get to say that is going against our policy and procedure, or that is breaking our standards of best practice, or whatever. And it's no longer you against them. It's the fact that you are accredited and that you have standards that you have to maintain.
And here's the handbook.
And here is how we are doing things. And so I think that also, it provides additional validity, and it takes it away from the personal rubs that can happen within a sim program. So if I'm going to air my dirty laundry, we didn't have a policy and procedure manual before we started applying for accreditation. And I wasn't the director, but I take responsibility for it, because I was the director, I wasn't named the director, but I actually, for the adult health portion, I functioned in that role, and I really should have. I've been getting those policies and procedures in place. So when
we're not a policy and procedures though kind of gal, you're a really fly by the seat of your pants kind of gal.
We did have them written for our SP program, which I was then in charge of, but it was a maturation process. It started in 2006 before there was even standards, right? And not even being aware, but the idea that we have to get a strategic plan. And any of you that are struggling with strategic plan, it's not as hard. I promise. I'm happy to help you. Use really
ChatGPT. That's my tip. Get started with ChatGPT.
ChatGPT is a very wonderful tool. Just don't let your students use it for their assignments. But
don't plagiarize, but it's a good jumping off point.
Yeah, it is. It gives you a lot of really great ideas and a lot of language. But don't be afraid of it. It's really not as bad. And I think that from the perspective of you have to write these policies and procedures, it's just really what you do and what are the standards saying? How are you training your simulation facilitators? How are you, all of those things. You just have to actually think it through and write it out, and make sure that you're hitting all of those important parts. And the last thing I'll say, as far as the certification piece is, there is people that are consultants they go and do these site visits. And if they're not doing your site visit, there are other people that will help you out so much, just asking questions, putting questions out again on LinkedIn or on the Sim Connect on SSH. It's really, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, and I think that it is a lot of work, regardless of which accreditation you choose. But I think the idea behind it is it's not just about the fact that you have all this hard work, but it is about, in the end, you do have something it's like cementing your institution.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think that it's not just about the accreditation at the end of the day. You're not doing all of this work to just get, the rubber stamp. You're doing all of this work to get your house in order so that even after the accreditation, you have your policy and procedure manual that was just updated. You've done all of your recent trainings. You have your data points in a collected way of how you're being able to look at them and evaluate it over time. You're building all of these things and getting all of these pillars in place so that it's not just the rubber stamp, okay, you're accredited, but it's also, this is now setting the tone for how our Sim Center will be run going forward. And again, that just, makes all the difference.
It really does. It really does. And I think that it really, again, it forces you to dust in the corners and to see where everything is.
It's like when companies coming over, you're like, oh, that thing I have not seen or noticed or looked at in months, that's over there. I need to go clean that.
Yeah.
But I think that that's what it does, is it makes it so that you don't just keep doing the status quo. And it's hard work, but I think that the fact that it's that pivotal moment that can really change things and set the tone for how your Sim Center is going to be run in the future, I think that's the coolest part of it.
Yeah. And again, there are multiple different accreditations that you can go through. Depends on where you are and what, you can do multiples. You could be accredited by all three of them. And I think once you do one, it's probably pretty easy to do the other two.
Yeah.
There is a hefty price tag for SSH. I cannot speak to ASPIH or CSAM as far as the cost, but they do charge a significant amount. I mean,
well, again, they bring consultants out. I think that's the one thing we haven't talked about here. Mm-hmm. But once you get all of your paperwork, all your documentation, your application ready to go, you submit that, and then they bring in consultants to your simulation center, walk around, do interviews, talk to everybody, and then they provide a report at the end to your leadership. If they do have to come out again, so if you don't pass accreditation, there is an additional cost to that, because again, that's someone's time coming back out again. But this is a boots on the ground, person to person type of situation here, where it's going to cost more money to be able to have that happen, because it is thorough. They don't just take the paperwork and say, okay, great. They send someone out. And I think what you said too, leveraging those consultants for what you need to advocate for simulation in your center, that's the part that I think is also, it's worth its weight in gold, because you can say what it is that you need, and you
things
have that
get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Magically things get done. Yeah.
And the other thing, when they do come, they want to interview students.
Mm-hmm.
So they ask you to get together a small group of students. They wanted to interview for us, because we had a very strong SP program. They wanted to interview the people that were involved in setting up that SP program and organizing that SP
interview.
Well, you had stepped away at that point.
Geez.
By that
I just
point,
got skipped over. I missed it.
Heather got that interview.
Oh, come on.
So, but the you do have different portions. So they would interview leadership. They'll interview the sim faculty. They'll interview whoever. So you as a director or whoever's leading this, you won't be there for all of them. They
when
don't
you
want
can't
you there.
make it all like shiny and pretty, and again.
Right.
Keep the smoke and mirrors, they
Right.
really dive in.
Well, they do. And again, I think it is like, let's look and
Yeah,
see if there's any more dust that you
absolutely.
didn't kick up,
Yeah, absolutely.
or any areas where you could make improvements. And if you think of it as, the idea of how can I make my sim center better and what can I do to do really good sim, and then have the biggest impact on our students, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? But it is, it's a process.
Because it's hard. That's why.
It is. It's a lot of work.
No, but I think, again, they're there to help you. And we've been to so many sim centers ourselves going around that I think a lot of times we can offer ideas or suggestions and people are like, I've never thought of that. These consultants have been to hundreds, if not thousands of sim centers, right? They know all of the tips and tricks and nitty gritty stuff. So they're going to be able to help you. They're not there to scrutinize you. They're not, I know we've talked about cleaning the house and stuff. They're not there to pick everything apart. They're there to help you.
Yeah.
So even just with it being able to offer recommendations of things they've seen, oh my gosh. I mean, again, it's kind of like learning, just the inside scoop from all of these sim centers, in one person that has all of that knowledge. So, I mean, again, it's hugely, hugely valuable.
Yeah. Agreed. And so I think the last thing to talk about is probably the newest one that's out, which is the Anaxel endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
And that endorsement is different than the accreditation from SSH. And I want to talk about that for a minute.
They get confused. Yes.
Well, it's easy to get confused, but it's really not. It's very clear. So when I talked to Teresa Gore, who helped to write these, she said that the reason that they did this was because a lot of places don't have the funding and don't have the staff and don't have the logistics to go through the entire accreditation process, but they want to be evaluated on their actual simulation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is again, you can have both the accreditation and the endorsement, and I encourage you to have that.
Yeah.
The other piece of this is if you are a nursing program, especially here within the United States, and they're like, well, the accreditation at SSH is great, but it's not nursing focused.
Mm-hmm.
This is a nursing association, so International Nursing Association for Clinical Simulation and Learning. But what it does is it looks at the healthcare simulation standards of best practice, which Anaxel houses and is responsible for. Of course, they collaborate with SSH and with ASPE on those standards, but those healthcare standards of best practice are housed within Anaxel, and they look at they call them the core four. So it's pre-briefing, debriefing. I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to look it up and make sure I know. But the core four is how they evaluate it: pre-briefing, preparation and briefing, facilitation. So that's sim facilitation, obviously. Professional integrity and debriefing. Mm-hmm. So those are all of the ones that they evaluate, and essentially what you do. And again, if I get this wrong, Anaxel, please correct me. But what they do, because I have not been through the process, is evaluate a few simulations that you do, and you need to send exemplars of the actual written simulations, and then the exemplars of the pre-briefing, the actual simulation itself, and then the debriefing. And they evaluate your simulation. So it's not your sim center. It's evaluating how you are doing sim, and they are endorsing that. Mm-hmm. So I think that those are all really important pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that, if you think about the National League for Nursing, nursing program of excellence, it's kind of the same idea. It's like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval of we are doing good sim here. We are doing really good things, and making sure that we are following and enforcing those standards. So if you're a smaller sim center, or if you're a sim center that can't necessarily afford the price tag of SSH, the currently they are about a quarter of the price between the
Well,
two.
I think it's a good place to start, right? Like you've already said, they're two very different things of what you're looking at, but it starts to get you used to going through that process. Let's pull our sims. We're going to show our exemplars. We're going to be able to send that in, do the evaluation. But I don't think that one negates the other, or it's an either or. But I think it's a first stepping stone that if you're looking into getting started with accreditation, that's your first step.
Or if you don't have a big staff to help with writing this, or again, leadership buy-in to bite off that whole piece.
And I think it can give you that stepping stone with leadership to be able to say, look, we went through this endorsement. Now we're looking to also get the accreditation, because again, really in our sim center, we want to have both. We want to have people who are Chessie certified. We want to have our CHSOS. We want to have, our accreditation, and we want to have our endorsement. That's the end goal, right? Is that we got all of our major players there set up. But I think that endorsement is that first step in being able to do that.
Yeah. And I think as you are looking for your own program to be accredited, it does add value and weight to what you're doing. Absolutely. Again, the more we let these people know, it really does help really reinforce that there is a science behind what we do, and that there are standards, and that, we are not just, pulling something together an hour before simulation starts and throwing it out there, that we really are dedicated to looking very strongly at not just the actual act of simulation, but the impact that the simulation is having on the learning for our students.
Yeah. I think one thing that I just want to bring up before we come to a close here is the debate between Chessie and Cheesy. And we've been saying Chessie.
Wait a minute. Cheese sauce.
Time. And then cheese sauce.
CHSOS or cheese sauce. Those are the things.
So I just want to make sure that we're bringing that up, because I feel like if not, we'd be remiss to not mention it. But I am full Chessie, which obviously we both have been saying this entire time. Where do you think Cheesy got started? Because everyone I have talked to has been like, it's Chessie, not Cheesy. So I don't even know where that started.
So I didn't know in the beginning that, again, I started like, I'm one of the dinosaurs. Was a young dinosaur, but I am one of the dinosaurs. So I just called it Chessie. I always called it Chessie. There isn't an S, it's, CHSE. So it's Chessie, but people call it Cheesy, and I don't know why they put.
You don't know why either. I don't know why either. I don't know where it came from, and anyone I've talked to has been like, "No, we don't." Like, you know what I mean? Everyone's like, "Other people do, but not me." And I'm like, I don't know where. It's kind of like this. I don't know where it is. So leave it in the comments if you're a Chessie or a Cheesy or a CHSOS or a cheese sauce. Because I want to take a poll. I want to know what people prefer, because I don't know where it started, and I feel like it's one of those, like, I don't know who actually calls it that, and what of this is myths and legends, and I honestly feel like maybe it's all made up. Maybe no one actually uses that, because I've only ever heard of it. I've never heard anyone actually say it.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Love to hear your kind of critical analysis of why there's value. I think the more we can think about advocacy within healthcare simulation, and the more that we can get the word out about the fact that we do have accreditation certifications to our regulating bodies, the more we are going to be established as one of the three braids of education. You think of the classroom, the clinical, and then simulation as being, a three-stranded braid, and how strong that can be. The more we solidify what we're doing and the value that it offers to our students. So put the stuff in comments. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and, get this distributed to a broader community within the industry.
Thanks for listening to Simulation Nation. We will see you next time.